And we are live. Welcome everybody to this webinar with Ayubenda at the WP Agency Summit. I am here with Abby Clement and James McMullen from Ayubenda, who are going to teach us how we can protect our customers' websites from liabilities and make them compliant with current regulations. Abby and James, thank you so much for coming on. Can you please introduce yourself a little bit and explain to us what you are doing at Ayubenda? Abby, if you want to start.
Sure. Thanks for having us. So I am Abby Clement. I'm head of content at Ayubenda. And I just speak about the law and how to technically also implement our solutions with your site. I do a lot of teaching because, it's one of those topics that people need to understand in order to, really see how to implement it and stuff like that. So I try to make a really, really boring, painful topic a little bit more approachable and less painful.
Great. And so I'm James. I work in BizDev at Ayubenda, and at the moment I'm reaching out to a lot of websites and a lot of companies, kind of highlighting some issues that they might have on their site and kind of like offering our solutions to them. And I also help web professionals and web agencies with calls to kind of go through any issues they're having and to kind of give them some resources on liabilities and how they can basically use our solutions to help their clients.
Fantastic. And Picha says hello. That's a familiar face. Hey, Picha, thanks for spending time with us.
Hi, Picha.
Hello.
So Abby has created a presentation for us. So I'll just bring that up onto the screen. And then with that, Abby, take it away.
All right, so we're just going to dive right in since there's quite a bit. And of course, James is going to be doing the live demo at the end. So today we're talking about how to make your client's site and app compliant and how to avoid liabilities. And the big first part of this is really going to be explaining also agencies' responsibilities in regards to compliance, and then how you can expand your expertise as well as add value and make your client's site and apps compliant with different data laws. So first of all, I do need to say that this webinar may contain simplifications and can't be intended as any one-to-one legal advice, because obviously we don't know your personal situation. So this is sort of just like a general overview, explaining things. For more in-depth information, of course, you can always visit our website. We have a lot of free resources and information available. Now, a little bit about Ayubenda really quickly. So we have over 60,000 paying clients in more than 100 countries. Also, we do have some free solutions as well. So that's not really included in this statistic. However, these companies all rely on our software solutions and direct assistance for online compliance. And we have everything from independent freelancers, whether they're web agencies or web professionals, also lawyers, to large enterprise companies, many familiar companies that you might know as well. And of course, we have all that information available on our site. You can check it out. This is just a quick little intro. And now we're going to dive directly into the presentation. So the number one thing is understanding the rules. We're just going to start with the basics, just because this can get confusing really quickly if we don't explain. So the first thing we want to look at is controller versus processor, data controller versus processor, and to understand which one of these applies to agencies. So the controller is the entity or legal person that determines the purpose and the ways that the personal data of users is processed. And now these terms generally apply to EU law, like the GDPR and things like that, which if you're operating on the internet would probably apply to you anyway, because you likely have some users in the EU. But the concept carries even if you don't have let's say users in the EU in some ways, and I'll explain a little bit just to get you in the right mind of thinking and the right frame of thinking, and also in terms of considering liability and things like that when it comes to managing the personal data of your clients. So anyway, with that said, jump right back. So the controller determines the purpose. So more or less, they determine why and how the data is being used. Why are you collecting IP address information? Why are you collecting email address information, for example? Okay, it might be to receive emails or promotional emails. The data controller is the one that has decided this. So usually the owner of the site or the app is the data controller, and in this case, this would be the client. The processor is usually the entity that processes personal data on behalf of the controller, which in many cases is the agency. However, you can be both in different situations. And by agency, if you're a freelance web professional, also consider that this can, I'm also talking to you here. So on the other hand, something you might need to consider is that you might be let's say, collecting your client's information. So if you have a website, for example, for your agency, and you also collect information from clients that might want to use your services or to get leads or something like that, in that way, you are operating as a data controller on your own right for your own purposes. So that's something to consider as well, not just how to help your clients be compliant, but also consider whether or not you're being compliant in cases where you are the data controller. So I just wanted to point that out.
Would that also mean that when we resell hosting, we are a data controller? Because essentially we run the hosting that collects the data?
I would say for hosting, it's more of a processor type situation, because you're not determining the purpose of the website isn't your website. You're not using it. You're not running the site, right? It's for your clients, for their purposes. So it's also still a sort of processor relationship. And I'm going to touch on even like hosting companies and things like that a little bit later on, actually. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I'll keep that in mind. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead here. So we're looking at protecting yourself, right? So not just protecting your clients, but protecting yourself. And one part of this is data processing agreements. So what is a data processing agreement? So and are they legally required? So the data processing agreement is more or less a written agreement between the controller and the processor, where you sort of outline your commitment to your ability to meet GDPR standards and to process things or process personal data in accordance with what the client requires and the law. So you're not going rogue where the client says, okay, I just need email addresses collected for my personal newsletter, and then you start sending direct email marketing things. That's completely wrong, because it's not your data. So it is an agreement where you outline your commitment to follow the instructions of the client and stuff like that. And also what's nice is it just formally defines the roles as well. And of course, this is just kind of useful because you also make a clear line that you're not the one that's determining the purposes, for example, right? So this somehow helps you in terms of, let's say, liability, because you're doing this processing on behalf of the client. All of this aside, data processing agreements are legally required when there's a controller-processor relationship under the GDPR. So it's important to note. And if it all seems a little bit confusing, I just want to say that we do have like a free starter template for a data processing agreement on our site. It isn't a part of any product. It's just that in all of the work that we were doing surrounding the GDPR with our lawyers to create the solution, we just created some free resources and starter templates for offline GDPR activities and other things like that. So we also have that available. People can take a look at it and get a better idea of what goes into a data processing agreement. Then, of course, with the data processing agreement being a sort of a written declaration of this relationship that you're having with the client, it of course means that the role comes with some responsibility, which can include things like DPIA cooperation. So a DPIA is a data protection impact assessment, and just to give you it's like a little bit more information on that. I'm just going to read really quickly some notes I have here. So it's a process that's used to help organizations to comply effectively with the GDPR. It's not usually required. It's only mandatory in cases where the data processing activity is high risk. So this is stuff like processing sensitive data, large scale processing of sensitive data, systematic monitoring of like a publicly accessible area, so CCTV. It's usually for sensitive things, but some organizations choose to do it just to sort of to understand their own processes and make sure that they are complying with the GDPR from the beginning. So if you are a web agency and you might be working with a larger company that has decided, maybe their data protection officer or something decided that they wanted to do their own internal assessment of their systems. And if you're a processor, they might need some cooperation from you because you are processing certain data on their behalf. So that's one of your responsibilities. Maybe they might say, okay, we need to understand how secure the servers that you're using to keep the email addresses of users, how secure that is, or whatever. If you're using an external provider, which should be agreed upon before. These are some of the things that can go into these data protection impact assessments. Sorry, I think I said the wrong thing earlier. Data protection impact assessment. So that's one thing. It might apply mostly in cases where you're working with larger companies, but it is good to know that as a processor, this is part of your responsibility. Also, helping your clients to comply with fulfilling end users' rights, right? So let's say under the GDPR, for example, an end user might say, I would like to exercise my right to erasure, or I want you to remove my email address from your mailing list or completely from your systems or something like that. If you're managing the email list for the client, they will then have to pass on this request to you and say, hey, I need to make sure that we remove this user's personal information. So you need to make sure that you're able to do that. Because this data protection, the DPA, the data processing agreement, a part of that agreement is you saying that you are able to hold up your end of the thing, of the bargain, and complying with GDPR requirements. Okay, so that's something also to keep in mind. Now, with that said, it can sound very complicated, but by and large, if you're using some third-party integrations and stuff like that, which should be agreed upon before, and it should be stated. So let's say you're using like MailChimp to manage the email list of your clients or something like that. Most of these companies already have a lot of these features built in, so that it's possible to do this. And something that's interesting to note is that around the time of the GDPR, MailChimp would have appended a data processing agreement, at least, and European users might have gotten an email about it, or it could be missed in your inbox, but they did send out some kind of communication. And they do have a data processing agreement as a part of their terms and conditions, I believe, or it might be linked in it, but separate. So if you're using their services now, you have entered into a data processing agreement with MailChimp, because they are processing data on behalf of everyone who's using their service. And they're not determining the use of that data. They're just processing it for everyone. And the same thing applies to a lot of hosting companies. So I would say take a look at your hosting company terms and conditions, or whatever contract you would have agreed to. Terms and conditions are essentially a contract. Most likely there would already be a data processing agreement between you and the hosting company as well. So this is just, we want to go quickly here because we don't have too much time, but I just wanted to point out some of that stuff. So even if it sounds very mysterious, very scary, it's not. It's actually already a part of a lot of agreements that you've probably agreed to, and just something to keep note of. And of course, there are other responsibilities that fall in line with this. And eventually, maybe at the end of this sort of webinar, we can put a link to one article we have that goes into more detail for anyone that's looking for more information on the responsibility of agencies under the GDPR. Now, of course, we're also going to touch on on cases where you don't have any, you're not based in the EU, you have no EU clients. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I also want to look really quickly at transparency and liability. So you do want to ensure that required security measures are taken. And under the GDPR, there is the responsibility to apply, let's say, at least industry level security measures to protect the personal data that you're processing. So as a part of that, your data processing agreement or whatever agreement you have with your clients, you are assuring them that you will handle the end user's data in a responsible manner. So you are responsible for making sure that you do have these security measures in place. What that means for your systems is up to you. If there are multiple people accessing, let's say, the email database account or whatever, maybe you have some kind of internal memo on how that data should be handled. Whatever measures you choose to put into your organization, but you do need to make sure that you are keeping security in mind, which goes without saying. Then also, as I mentioned before, helping the client to respond to users' requests in the exercising of their rights. I explained that one before, so that's something to keep in mind. Also assisting and giving the client access to any information that's needed to show compliance on the part of the client. So this one's important to point out as well. So if you are processing information on behalf of your clients, and let's say a user makes a complaint to the Data Protection Authority and says, okay, I told this person to remove my email address and I still got an email or something like that. Most cases, a complaint won't be just for something like this, but let's say it does happen, and the client needs to prove that they did comply with the request and things like that. If you're managing that email list, you do need to be transparent and open and provide the needed information so that the client can show compliance on their part, especially also in cases of data breach or, as I mentioned earlier, during a data protection impact assessment. Now, just going ahead here on liability, which obviously is quite important. When the controller or the client is liable for the damage caused by the processing that violates something like GDPR, then the processor, which is the agency in this case, is generally only responsible for the damage caused by the processing if it has not been, if the agency has not fulfilled its obligations under the GDPR. So basically, in many cases, you're only liable if it was your fault, if you didn't fulfill your obligations under the GDPR, or you broke the agreement. Let's say you didn't mention that you're going to use a sub-processor. You didn't get permission from the client or anything like that, and you just decided to outsource the management of one of your processes that includes user data, and you didn't inform anyone, you didn't get permission from the client, because you can't do it and then inform the client. You do need to get written agreement and append your agreement that you're allowed to do this. So only generally in these cases will you be liable. However, consider that one of the articles under the GDPR does allow for not just for some joint liability, and there's another technical term that I'm not remembering at this moment, but basically what it does is it allows the user to, let's say, if they are bringing suit, you might, if you are named and you're not liable, there can be cases where if there is some kind of punishment or payment or something like that, you might have to do it and then get the client to reimburse you for this situation. So reimburse is not the right word, but there are some cases where there can be a joint suit and maybe you get pulled into it, and then you have to settle with the client between yourselves once the user's situation has been resolved, that whether or not you were liable, and then sort of get reimbursed for whatever you had to pay out from the client. So with all of that said, it's something to keep in mind, and I would say that we can see that already if you're just in the business of of being an agency or a web professional, it's already in your best interest to try to make sure that your clients are compliant, because you don't want to get dragged down with them. And essentially, if you're working with clients, you are a processor, right? So now let's go ahead and look really quickly at the US and other regions outside of the EU. So while, again, do consider that with the GDPR, it applies in several cases. One is where you're an EU-based company or entity, regardless of where your clients are based. So even if you don't have EU users, you still need to comply with the GDPR. And then the other is where you're based anywhere, but you have EU-based users, and therefore you do need to apply GDPR standards to those users. So on the off chance that you fall into neither of these groups, processing, none of your clients have EU-based users. They only have, let's say, US or users based in some other region. Even in these cases, like consider, for example, the CCPA, which is California's the state of California's latest Consumer Protection Act for personal data. Even in these cases, one of the consequences of not complying with this law is the fact that users can bring suit where they feel violated. So generally, it's in your best interest to have some sort of written agreement, obviously between you and your client, in terms of what your responsibilities are in regards to processing data on their behalf. Of course, this is just, I would say, like, this is just my opinion on this, but do consider that without these kind of written agreements, if something does go wrong, you're at the mercy of the courts because you didn't have something in place. Now, I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir generally. You having these kind of contracts would be something that's done by default with an agency or something like that. But sometimes some of these things fall through the cracks, especially things like adding on a third party to help with some processing and not first clearing it with the client. You know, things can happen. So it is something to take note of. All right, so we're just gonna hop ahead here. And as I said, it is in your best interest to help your clients comply in terms of just protecting yourself. So just to go ahead quickly, because time is coming down. So we're going to look at now adding value and making your website, your clients' websites and apps compliant. So besides being in your own best interest for trying to protect yourself overall in terms of liability, of course, you have the opportunity to add value for your clients, to extend your services as well, and give more of a complete sort of solution to your clients. And James is going to go into demoing exactly how this can be done, how multiple accounts can be managed and things like that quite easily. I'm just going to really touch on what the existing privacy laws with the biggest impact are. The GDPR, we just spent a bunch of time talking about that, we all know. The e-privacy, less well known, it's also called the cookie law, and it's the reason behind all of those cookie pop-ups that come up on websites if you're based in Europe, where they say the site uses cookies. You know, you can give your permission or not. And then we also have
like the WP Agency Summit site does, powered by Ubuntu, by the way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then we have the CCPA and CALOPA, which are, let's say in the US, there aren't a lot of federal level laws for data privacy. They usually exist on a state basis. CCPA and CALOPA from the state of California are some of like the most robust laws in place. So they're worth a mention. If you're complying with those in the US, chances are you be handling data well in regards to other states with less strong laws. So it's worth taking note of. Under the GDPR, CALOPA as well, one of the basic requirements is a privacy policy. There's specific disclosures that need to be made about your identity, why you're processing the data, what data you're processing, effective date of the privacy policy. With the GDPR, what is the legal basis of your processing? What is the justifiable reason that you're actually processing these people's data for? You know, all of these things are required. So that's your privacy policy. When it comes to the e-privacy, as was just mentioned, you're looking at things like blocking cookie scripts from running on the website until the person has given consent. And then further under the GDPR, you want to keep consent records of these consent. You know, a lot of records are quite important under the GDPR because so much of being able to prove that you are compliant goes into collecting the records. And we do have some solutions that kind of automatically do this as well. Another thing to mention here is with the CCPA, similar to the e-privacy, but not quite, it does sort of an opt-out approach. So if you do have Californian-based users, you're sharing their data or selling the data. The term selling under the CCPA simply means sharing their data with third parties for any kind of profit. So that can include, in some cases, even something like, you know, tracking cookies for running ads like Google ads or things like that. And what you need to do is you need to have like a notice on the site that says that this is happening, and if you'd like to opt out, you can click here to opt out. So, you know, these are some of the basic requirements in terms of complying. And I'm running low on time, so I'm not going to go into this. It was just how to tell which laws apply and which do not. I'm going to skip ahead. Generally, the laws that apply are the ones in the country where your client is based, as well as where their users are based. That's the long and short of it. And as I just hinted to, some practical ways to comply is to have your privacy policy. Try to minimize the data usage, so you only process the data that is needed. This also cuts down on the liability of the client, or you if you are the data controller. You want to make sure that you have a consent management platform in place for EU websites or for Californian-based users, so depending. And also you want to make sure that you're getting opt-in consent for EU-based users. And just to touch on this point, it is different for users based in the US. So if you're running, and this is something to note because so many agencies deal with mailing lists, if you have a sign-up form on your client's website, for EU-based users, you can't pre-tick boxes. You can't pre-tick, I want to be signed up to this mailing list, I agree to marketing, or I agree to, you know, whatever. You can't have that. It needs to be opt-in. The user needs to take an affirmative action. So pre-tick boxes are illegal under the GDPR and EU data law. So that's something to keep note of. With US-based users, you have the CAN-SPAM Act, which is actually a federal level act. And it allows you to sign people up to lists without doing this opt-in thing. But there are a lot of requirements in how you must allow them to opt out. So you have to make sure that the email always has an unsubscribe link, that they can unsubscribe without needing to log in, and things like that. And we do have a lot of documentation on our site that explains this. And also, I mean, maybe James will talk about it a little bit later, but we do have some training available aside from our own videos. Our partnership program where we work with agencies to sort of do like a quick run through of all of this stuff so that you can really understand what you need to know when it comes to implementing these solutions on your own websites and for your clients. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you're keeping the legally required records and proofs, because under the laws like the GDPR, proofs are really important, legally required in the case of consent. And also the burden of proof always lies with the data controller, but as the processor, you do play a part in helping and keeping track of the processing that you're doing on behalf of the client. So records and proofs become really important, and records and proofs are covered by two of our products, which are the consent solution and internal privacy management solution, which we're not demoing today because we're a little bit short on time, but of course we'll provide the links to everything. So with that said, what James is going to go through today is the privacy and cookie policy generator, and as well as the cookie solution. And we chose these because these kind of work also not just for the EU, but also for the US. The cookie solution also ties into and gives you the functionality to display that notice of collection for Californian users. So our CCPA features are tied into both of these products. So we thought it would be a good idea to demo these two that can apply and be helpful to you and your users, whether you're based in the EU or based in the US or elsewhere. And with that said, I guess, James, you can take it away.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Abby. That was a lot to digest. So I definitely recommend heading over to the Ayubenda booth once this presentation is over to catch the replay and to really dive into what Abby just shared with us. And James, if you want to share your screen now, then we'll bring it up and you can walk us through the platform.
Sounds good. Okay. Perfect.
There we go.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Abby. That was really awesome. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm just kind of going to give you a very short demo of the Ubuntu products, just to kind of give you an idea of what everything looks like. So as you can see, this is the Ubuntu dashboard. And one really awesome feature of the dashboard is it's designed specifically for web professionals and web agencies. They're managing lots of different clients' sites. So you can see I've got lots of different projects here, and it's really easy to kind of jump into the project and then go in and make any edits or updates remotely if you need to do that. To basically create a project, we just start by clicking Start Generating. And from here, we can select whether we want to create a project for a website, for a mobile app, or we want to do it for a Facebook app. And then we have 8 fully supported languages for all of our products, which is really great. I think for now, I'll stick with English. My other languages aren't too good. And then once you fill in the website here, you can then click on Start Generating. But I already created a project just before for the Ubuntu website to give you guys an idea. So I'm going to jump into this project. And from here, we get to the project dashboard. And as you can see, these are all of the products that we offer. So I'm going to briefly explain what each of them are. So this is the privacy and cookie policy generator. So this allows you to customize, to draft, and remotely update a privacy and cookie policy for your client's site. We then have the cookie solution, which is a tool that can be used to allow you to comply with EU cookie law and CCPA from a technical perspective. We then have the terms and conditions generator, which works similarly to the privacy and cookie policy generator, but it allows you to draft, customize, and remotely update a terms and conditions document with over 100 pre-drafted clauses. We then have our consent solution, which is an API used to store proofs of consent in order to be compliant with GDPR and also the recently introduced LGPD. And then finally, we have our internal privacy management, which is a solution that allows you to easily store a record of all the data processing activities that happen internally. For time purposes, I'm just going to focus on the privacy and cookie policy generator and the cookie solution. So yeah, let's jump into the privacy and cookie policy generator. So I'm going to click on Edit. And from here, you can see that I have added some services. Now, what I mean by services are you need to describe the data processing activities that are occurring on the site. So you need to add information to the privacy policy. So you do that by adding a service. So when I add PayPal, I add Sentry, you're adding a clause to the privacy policy in order to describe that in the document. And to add more, we just click on Add Service, and this panel appears. Now, one really cool feature of our privacy and cookie policy generator is we have the scanner. So when you select the scanner, you type in your URL, and it automatically detects any third-party technologies that are used on the website. So as you can see, I scanned it earlier. When I made the scan result, 90 seconds after I did the scan, I then got an email to say your scan results are ready, and this appeared. And the scan results are divided into 2 sections. So we have perfect matches. So these are the third-party technologies that we know for sure that you're using on the site. And then we have suggestions, which are technologies that we know that you're using, but you need to kind of define how you're using them in more detail. But it should be noted that you can also choose from 1,459 clauses, which we have on our database. And these clauses are remotely updated by an international team of lawyers. And if there are any changes to the law or to the technologies on the site, then those lawyers will go in and update those for you. So you don't have
And that is actually the reason, if I may interrupt briefly, that's the reason why I've chosen Ayubenda for the WP Agency Summit website, because I certainly don't have time to keep up with all those changes. And to be honest, when I was setting it up, it was a bit overwhelming to have this variety of choice. But then the scanner that you just mentioned made things very straightforward. And obviously, since I've built my own website and all the agency owners watching this, they know exactly what type of tools they are employing on the websites that they build. So they can just type into the search box like Facebook Pixel or something like that. And then you see all the services related to Facebook, and you can just pick and choose whichever you want. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point, Jan. So to kind of go through all of these clauses, if you have specific clauses that you want to look for, you can just use the really handy search bar that we have. And also on top of that, what I didn't mention about the scanner is that a recent feature we've added to the scanner is that every 30 days, we'll automatically scan your site, and we'll send you an email if we find any technologies that are used on the site, but they're not in your privacy policy. So this is really helpful when you have lots of different sites that you're managing, and you may have added a few different technologies, but you forgot to add it to your privacy policy. So we'll kind of give you a little nudge for that. But yeah, it's also, we're not just talking about technologies. You want to kind of describe all of the data processing activities that are happening on the site. So if you have a contact form, you can very easily find that, and we have a clause dedicated for this. Of course, you can also click on the Create Custom Service button here, and you can add your own custom text to the privacy policy. Of course, this isn't going to be remotely updated by our team of lawyers, so if you need to make any changes, you can then come back to it very easily through the dashboard and just come back into the service and remotely update it yourself. I think for the purposes of this demo, it's also really cool to show you what happens when you add a service. So in the perfect matches, I didn't add Google Tag Manager, so I'm going to add it here. And when I add Google Tag Manager, it asks me to select the region. So I have to select here. I then need to click Ireland, and I'm going to click on Save. Once I've done that, perfect. And then I'm going to save and close. And you're going to see in a matter of seconds that Google Tag Manager is now added to the dashboard. The next step for the privacy and cookie policy generator is we need to define the legislation-specific standards. So you need to apply GDPR's broader protection standards to EU only, or to all of your users. You then need to enable CCPA disclosures for Californian users. And then you need to enable LGPD disclosures for users residing in Brazil, if you have any users from Brazil. And then we also have our managed language widget here. So if you have the site in multiple languages and you need the document in more than one language, then you can basically click on the language you want to translate the documents for, and you don't have to do the configuration again. You just basically, it translates for you straight away. And then I've already activated the privacy policy because that's automatic with the generation. And then we need to add the company address and the name and the email, which I've done. And that is basically everything ready to go. So if we click on preview, we can see what the document looks like. This is a very simplified version of the document. And then if you go to the bottom right here, we can then see the privacy policy in a lot more detail. Now, the policy is divided into, I like to think of it as two sections: a static section that has information that has to be added to every privacy policy, like the owner and data controller, the types of data collected. We also added a disclosure for CCPA, which is static text that is added to the policy right here. And then if we scroll up, we get to see the other part of the policy, which is the dynamic section. So as you remember, we added Google Tag Manager. So this is what Google Tag Manager looks within the privacy policy. So information on Google Tag Manager, where the place of processing is, a link to their privacy policy, and then information on CCPA, because we added CCPA disclosure. So if you add any third-party technologies or any services to the privacy policy, this is what it will look like within the privacy policy itself. Great. And then, yeah, once we've basically configured the document, the very last thing we need to do is to embed it on the site. So we're going to click on embed, and we have three options. So you can add a widget to the footer, which looks a bit like this. You can also use a direct link, which is also really helpful for apps. And then you can embed the text in the body. So with this option, you copy this code, you paste this code into a blank page in the site, all of the text of the policy appears, and then it takes on the style of the site without you having to import any fonts of any sort. But yeah, that's the privacy and cookie policy generator in a nutshell. The next thing we're going to have a look at is the cookie solution. So as I mentioned, it allows you to comply with EU cookie law and also with CCPA. So I'm going to click on edit here, and this brings up the configurator. So as you can see, I've already created a banner right here, and you can basically, change the color, the style, add a logo to your banner, basically make it in whichever way you want in order for it to kind of blend into the site and look natural, and have the user to have a nice experience when they come to the site and they see the banner. You can do a lot more. You can change the position of the banner, and you're going to see a live preview of what the banner looks like when it's changed on the right-hand side here. You can see what it looks like on a tablet, what it looks like on a mobile, and then what it looks like on a standard desktop. And of course, yeah, to change the color, it's super easy. You can kind of go in and just kind of define whichever color that you want. You can also add, or you have to add the legislation-specific standards here. So I've applied both GDPR and CCPA. This is a really cool feature of the cookie solution. So this banner here is our GDPR compliant banner, which the European users will see. And then we auto detect the location of the user based on the legislation that they need to see. So only your Californian users will then see the California notice of collection. So they won't see the GDPR banner. They'll just see this notice of collection for CCPA, which has a link to the cookie policy, the do not sell my personal information opt-out link, and then a link to the privacy policy. So that's really cool. And then on top of that, you can add other features, so for category consent, and you can also enable IAB transparency and consent framework. So on top of our cookie solution, we are a certified IAB consent management platform. So basically any consents that are given through our cookie solution will basically go along the IAB TCF framework, the IAB transparency and consent framework. So if you have any clients that are online publishers, then this is imperative for them. And to add that, it's super easy. You just click on one button and all of the correct wording is then added to the banner. And yeah, these are just some really basic features. When you go into advanced view, you can do a lot more with the cookie banner. So I'm going to give you an example. So here, you can change the content of the banner. You can change the structure of the banner by HTML. You can change the style of the banner. You can basically configure the banner in order to kind of whatever works best for you. But yeah, so once we've configured it, we're going to click on Save. And from here, we're then going to, my internet is slow. I apologize. This is an internet issue or anything else. Here we go. Okay. So once we have configured it, we click on Save, and we then get this unique code. And we can then copy this code, and we can add the banner to the site, either from, add the head tag of the site, or you can use a plugin. So the plugins that we have, of course, we have a WordPress plugin. We also have plugins for Joomla, for PrestaShop, for Magento, for the other common CMS systems. And yeah, the next thing, once you've kind of pasted the banner in, is you need to priorly block the cookie scripts. So as Abby was mentioning, the ePrivacy directive stipulates that you have to ensure that the cookie scripts are not running on the site unless the user has given their consent. And if you click on the learn more about prior blocking here, you can then see our guide, which will take you through a step-by-step on how to do a lot of this. We have prior blocking for through a plugin. You can also use Google Tag Manager, or you can manually tag the cookie scripts yourself. And those are just 3 options. We have a lot of other options that you can kind of choose from. But yeah, so that is an overview, a very quick overview of the privacy and cookie policy generator and the cookie solution. In terms of the terms and conditions document generator and the consent solution and the internal privacy management, yeah, I think the best way to kind of get a bit more in-depth is if you sign up for an account and you kind of go through those yourself. It's really comprehensive. And as Abby mentioned as well, we have a lot of support documentation on our site, which will not only give you an overview of the main online legal requirements, but also the Ubenda solutions. And then, of course, we have our partner program, which we give dedicated support to web agencies and web professionals in order to kind of help them utilize all of our software as best as they possibly can. But yeah, so that's basically everything. And yeah, I'll pass it back over to Jan.
I love it. And we have a really good question coming in from Shabazz. He wants you to confirm that you can geolocate the user and then load the banners as they are needed rather than bugging everybody with everybody's banners.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, the banner will basically appear dependent on the location. So, if you're based in the EU, you don't need to see a CCPA notice of collection because that's not relevant for you. So, yeah, you basically configure the parameters of the cookie solution in such a way that they only see the banner that is relevant to them. Exactly.
Yeah, and he also pointed something out that is really interesting, and that is the automatically generated privacy policy, which is something we touched upon earlier, that your lawyers are doing the work that we would have to do otherwise in keeping up to date with all the regulations, everything that is coming on. We can essentially outsource our work to Ubenda and then reap the benefits. That is something that I think is the most important feature besides the cookie thing. I always have doubts when I use these cookie integrations, and when I have the GDPR plugins, there are so many plugins in the repository that claim to be GDPR compliant, but then you hear these horror stories that some plugins don't actually do what they are supposed to do. And when you try to test them, you see that the Facebook pixel, for example, is loaded even though you didn't consent to that yet. So that is something that, from my experience, sets Ubenda apart, is that it's actually blocking things and blocking stuff as it's supposed to be. But I would love to know a little bit more about the agency program, if you could dive a little bit deeper into that, because I think it's really important for agencies to understand that while it is a lot of work to be compliant and to build websites that are compliant, there's also a lot of opportunity to earn recurring revenue by reselling Ubenda, for example. If you could shine a bit of light on that, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
James,
sure. So basically, our solutions are, as I mentioned, are designed for web professionals and web agencies to kind of use those for their clients' sites. So you can basically resell our solutions to your clients, and you can also provide your own markup as well for labor costs, for installation, for constantly kind of like updating it. So you're more than welcome to do that. And we have a lot of agencies within our network that are already doing this at the moment. Yeah, and then on top of that, we also have our partner program, which is really cool because there are different levels to the partner program. There's bronze, silver, and gold, and each level kind of gives you different benefits. The bronze is a great place to start, obviously, but that it's pretty easy. You just have to pass a very simple test on kind of the main legal requirements, and we have a lot of teaching materials in order to kind of help you pass that. And then as you kind of move up the ladder, you get a lot more benefits on top of that. So definitely give that a consideration.
So it's not something that you can easily join and just be listed as a partner. You have to prove that you know what you are doing, which then in turn creates more authority for you because you actually know what you are talking about when your clients ask you about this. You can refer them. I've seen this partner directory that you have on the website. So if somebody doubts your capabilities, you could just refer them to the partner directory, send them a screenshot of your logo there, and that should essentially seal the deal, in my opinion.
Yes, exactly. Also, you have the partner, the certification badge that you can choose to display on your site as well. So that's kind of nice. You can indicate just without having to use too much words that you have completed the certification. And some of the benefits that James kind of alluded to is it's also things like dedicated phone support and other things like that to make sure that you are like always up to date with what you're doing and making sure that you know how to implement these things. So
That
Yeah,
is really
and
nice. I
the link
think
is
that,
right there as well. Perfect.
yeah, I'm just putting that up because especially that direct access to Ayurveda is really, really important, because when you have a client asking you a question that you cannot answer yourself, you want to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody who can, so that you can get back to your customer. We don't have any further questions, but I will assume as soon as people dive into Ayurveda and dive deeper into this topic, which you can do, by the way, by checking out James's session on the summit. So that is a really, really deep dive into why agencies need to be aware of what's out there in terms of legislations. And then that is so cool. Michael Wright just shared a comment with us. He won a 10% discount. Congrats, Michael.
Nice.
Amazing. Get your certification on as well, bro. You will need that in the future.
I love it.
And Shabazz has another question. I'm glad to see some questions coming in here. How much does the certification cost for the partner program?
Nice. Yeah, so it's completely for free. Yeah, so you don't have to pay anything. So for the bronze, the only stipulation is you basically have to have a Ubuntu account, and then you need to pass the test. For the silver program, if I'm not mistaken, you have to have a Ubuntu account, you have to pass the test, and then you have to have $500 worth of, am I correct, Abby? Yeah.
I can't remember if the 500 was for the silver, but the point is that you need to have a certain number of licenses, because if you're doing it on that level, then likely you're reselling. So it's not that just just random people just decide to do it and then, you know, you're not using it. So if you're accessing the resources and things like that, you're an agency, then you have to have these licenses that you're using for reselling, but you're reselling them. So you're not actually paying us for the certification. We just want to make sure that you know how to implement properly.
Yeah. And yeah, sorry, what I was saying was, yeah, it's $500 of worth of licenses rather than like you paying us. It's like you're just using a certain amount of our licenses, basically. So you have a big enough package. Yeah.
And then there's the gold, but for the bronze, that's not required. So you can start there anyway.
So the bronze is like the starting point, and then you work your way up as you continue to resell Ayurveda, then you progress to the higher levels.
Exactly.
Yeah. So at the bronze, you have like the basic OCI, so the online compliance, so certification thing. So it's like basic knowledge for implementing the solution. And then obviously, as you go to higher levels, you have the more advanced also knowledge as well, because you're dealing with just more sites and everything like that. So you need advanced information. But of course, regardless, we have a lot of documents available. And then we have like the chat and everything where you can always get support, also the forums and things like that. So you're never really like alone and lost.
Yeah. So that is everything on ayurveda.com if you want to learn more. And also, to wrap up this webinar, I would like to refer you to the booth that Ayurveda has on the WP Agency Summit. As Michael said, you can win some discount codes there. So that is the reason alone to reach out there. And 10% is not the highest. You can win more. So I definitely recommend you check them out, and especially get in touch about their certification and their partner program, because that's just not doing that, in my opinion, is leaving money on the table, because it is a service that you need to know about when you're building websites anyways. So why not get some credibility around that, build some authority with having a certification, and resell Ayurveda as well. Abby and James, thank you so much for coming on. I had a blast.
Thanks for having us. I don't know if I could say really quickly that even when you create an account, we do have like this affiliate also link that each account also has, so that you can pass on savings and also get paid. So some people do that. Some individuals have made a side business of that as well.
I love it.
Just recommending it using your link. I just wanted to throw that in there. But anyway, thanks so much for having us.
That's a great addition. So thanks everybody for attending this webinar, for spending the time with us. And if you've seen the replay, definitely head over to the Ayurveda booth to get your questions answered. Thank you so much.